My name is Emily Carson, and I never thought I'd end up in court, especially not being sued by my own parents. Let me rewind for a second. I'm 29 years old, and just a few weeks ago, I finally bought my first home. Not a fancy mansion or anything like that, just a modest 3-bedroom fixer-upper in the suburbs of Denver, Colorado. But to me, it meant everything. It wasn't just about owning property. It was the culmination of a decade's worth of sacrifice budgeting and late nights working 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet. When the realtor handed me the keys, I cried, not out of exhaustion, though that too, but out of pure disbelief. For the first time in my life, I had something that was truly mine. That feeling didn't last long. 3 weeks after I moved in, I came home from work to find a thick envelope wedged into my mailbox. At first, I thought it might be more closing paperwork or junk mail. But when I saw the return address Carson & Carson Family Law Group, my stomach sank. Inside were legal documents, court papers. I was being sued. By my parents. Yeah, you heard that right. My own mom and dad, Martha and Greg Carson, were suing me. According to the documents, they were seeking $97,000, claiming I had unjustly enriched myself by withholding familial financial contributions and misappropriating shared legacy assets. Legal jargon, sure, but the message was crystal clear. They were angry I bought a house without them, and they wanted a piece of it. I sat on the floor of my bare living room surrounded by unpacked boxes and secondhand furniture and just stared at the paperwork. My hands trembled. My vision blurred. I couldn't process what I was looking at. How did we get here? What kind of parents sue their daughter over a house she bought with her own money? The truth is, it didn't start with the house. It started long before that, with control, with expectations, with quiet manipulation masked as family loyalty. I wish I could tell you this was some kind of misunderstanding, that it was a paperwork error or a joke that went too far. But it wasn't. This lawsuit was very real, and beneath it all, it carried something more poisonous than any legal claim. It carried years of buried resentment, control, and the assumption that no matter how old I got, I still owed them something. I'd love to say I was surprised, but deep down, I wasn't. Because if I'm honest, my entire life had been built around one simple rule in our house: the family always came first. So long as that meant following my parents' rules, doing what they expected, and never ever stepping out of line. And me, I was always the black sheep. The one who asked too many questions. The one who dreamed of being independent. The one who didn't want to stay trapped in a system where love came with conditions and obedience was mistaken for loyalty. This wasn't just about the house. This was about the fact that for once, I had built something they couldn't control. And now they wanted to take it away. But I wasn't going down without a fight. Because if there's one thing you learn after 10 years of scraping by eating beans and rice, working 70-hour weeks, wearing the same 3 thrift store outfits until they fall apart, it's that when you finally earn something, truly earn it, you'll defend it with everything you've got. So yeah, I called a lawyer. I collected every receipt, every pay stub, every piece of evidence that proved I did this on my own. I wasn't just going to prove them wrong, I was going to prove it to myself. But before I tell you how that all played out in court, you need to understand how it all began. Because this story didn't start with a lawsuit. It started in a house much like the one I just bought. Except in that house, freedom came at a cost. And love. It always had a price tag. I grew up in Maplewood, a middle-class suburb just outside of Denver. To outsiders, the Carsons were a picture-perfect American family. We had a 2-story house with blue shutters and a swing set in the backyard. My dad, Greg, worked as an accountant, and my mom, Martha, was a stay-at-home parent who eventually ran a part-time bookkeeping business from our basement. We took summer road trips to national parks, decorated the house like crazy for Christmas, and never missed a Sunday service at the local Methodist church. But behind that clean-cut exterior was a world where every aspect of life was monitored, especially money. My mom wasn't just frugal. She was militant about finances. At age 9, I was given my first allowance $5 a week, but I had to log every penny I spent in a little green spiral notebook. Every Saturday morning, we'd sit at the kitchen table and go over it together. Emily, why did you spend $2.50 on a keychain? What's the return on that investment? She'd ask, tapping her red pen against the margin, like she was grading a term paper. I just liked it, I'd mumble. Do you like being poor? She'd always say that with a smile like it was a joke, but it never felt like one. My younger brother Jake didn't seem to mind the system. In fact, he thrived under it. He loved showing Mom his color-coded budgets and obsessing over compound interest before he even hit high school. He was the golden child, always praised for being responsible, disciplined, and family-minded. I was none of those things in their eyes. While Jake was praised for saving, I was scrutinized for spending, even if it was on school supplies or a birthday gift for a friend. If I bought something without pre-clearance, I'd get an earful. If I asked questions about why our family fund was necessary, I was labeled disrespectful. Oh, the family fund. That phrase came into my life around age 13 and hung over me like a storm cloud well into adulthood. It was never fully explained. Only that every Carson child would one day be expected to contribute. The money would be pooled to help with shared family needs, though those were never defined. No details, no transparency, just obligation. And there were rules, always rules. When I got my first part-time job at 16, my mom insisted I open a joint bank account with her. I'll help you manage your finances, she said. What that meant was she could monitor every transaction in real time. If I grabbed fast food after a shift, I'd get a text within 10 minutes. Emily, do you really need to be eating out when we have leftovers at home? My brother, of course, didn't mind. He reported my spending like he was on payroll. Emily bought a tank top from the mall today. He'd whispered to Mom like some budget informant. But the real breaking point came my senior year of high school. I had worked hard. I got into 3 universities, 2 of them out of state. I even landed a scholarship to one, a 75% tuition award from the University of Arizona. I was thrilled. Until I found out my mom had been opening my mail. I already declined those offers, she said casually one evening when I brought it up. You're staying here, going to community college, living at home, and starting your family contributions immediately. I froze. You what? You don't need to go out of state to learn basic accounting. Besides, you'll save thousands and support the family at the same time. I remember that moment so clearly, like everything in me broke at once. That night, I cried into my pillow for hours. Not because I didn't get to leave, but because I finally understood the truth. I wasn't a daughter in their eyes. I was an asset. A future contributor to a mysterious fund I had no say in. That's when I made my decision. If I wanted a life of my own, I'd have to break away completely. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be fast. But it would be mine. And I would never ever open a joint bank account again. Leaving wasn't a dramatic movie moment. There were no screaming matches, no suitcases hurled down staircases. It was quiet. Chillingly quiet. I waited until the night before college orientation when my parents thought I had agreed to their plan. I had packed in secret for weeks. Clothes, personal documents, a prepaid phone card, and the acceptance letter to the University of Arizona they never knew I held on to. I had also opened my own bank account under a friend's mailing address, squirreling away every cent from my part-time job at the local bookstore. That night, I left a note on the kitchen counter. I love you, but I need to live life on my own terms. Then I slipped out the back door with 2 duffel bags and enough cash to last me hopefully through the first few weeks. I took a Greyhound bus across 3 states. It was a 16-hour ride through dusty highways and sleepless tension. Every time the bus pulled into a rest stop, I expected to see my dad's truck or my mom's unmistakable red lipstick glaring from the driver's seat. But no one came. They didn't chase me. They didn't call. They just let me go. It should have felt like freedom, but it felt like abandonment. Still, I threw myself into the new life I'd chosen. The University of Arizona became my sanctuary and my battlefield. My scholarships covered tuition and some housing, but everything else was on me. I worked 3 jobs at once: dishwasher in the campus dining hall, overnight cashier at a 24-hour drugstore, and weekend dog walker for wealthy suburbanites. I took every odd gig I could find, proofreading term papers, editing resumes, even transcribing voice memos for grad students. Time was money, and I couldn't afford to waste either. I lived in the cheapest student housing available, a concrete dorm that smelled like mildew and regret. I shared a room the size of a prison cell with a chain-smoking art major named Danielle, who owned 2 lizards and didn't believe in doing dishes. My diet was a tight rotation: instant noodles, discount eggs, oatmeal, and occasionally leftover cafeteria food if I timed my shift right. I stole condiment packets in bulk and rationed shampoo. But I never complained. Not once. Because every sleepless night, every skipped meal, every exhausting shift, it meant I was one step closer to building something of my own. Something I didn't have to justify to anyone. Something no one could take. By senior year, I had stopped hearing from my parents altogether. No holiday calls, no birthday cards, not even a passive-aggressive email. It was like I'd been written out of the family ledger, my existence erased for refusing to play by the rules. Jake, my brother, stayed in touch at first. He came to visit me once during my sophomore year. He brought homemade cookies from Mom and a folded-up spreadsheet she had printed for budget advice. He said, "You don't have to do this the hard way. Just come home. Start over. They'll forgive you if you contribute." I told him no. He didn't come back. When I graduated with honors, I stood on that stage alone. No family photos, no proud parents in the audience. Just me, a borrowed cap, and the knowledge that I'd done it on my own. I walked across that stage with $54,000 in student debt, permanent eye bags, and a fierce fire in my gut. I promised myself one thing: I would never again give anyone the power to say I owed them my success. Graduating was only half the battle. I still had to survive. After college, I landed an entry-level position at a small digital marketing firm in Phoenix. The starting salary, $31,000 a year. Not terrible for a first job, but when you had student loans the size of a small mortgage and zero financial backup, it felt like peanuts. I knew I couldn't afford to live alone, so I rented a room more like a glorified closet in a crumbling 4-bedroom house with 3 other people I found through Craigslist. My room had just enough space for a twin mattress, a folding desk, and a rack of thrift store clothes. There was no closet, and one of the windows was duct-taped shut to keep out the dust. Rent was $375 a month, utilities included. It wasn't glamorous, but it was manageable. Every dollar I earned was accounted for. I created a budgeting spreadsheet so detailed it looked like a military operation. Rent, phone, internet, groceries, insurance, student loans, gas. And then, whatever I had left, I shoved into savings. I walked everywhere. Literally, even in the blazing Arizona heat. If something was more than 2 miles away, I either biked or took the bus. I bought all my groceries in bulk, cooked every meal at home, and used a single reusable water bottle I got for free at orientation. On weekends, while most of my coworkers were out brunching or taking day trips to Sedona, I was restocking shelves at a hardware store for $12 an hour. I picked up freelance social media gigs for small businesses in the evenings, designing Canva posts and writing captions for $25 a pop. I didn't date. I didn't go out. I didn't even subscribe to Netflix. It sounds miserable, but I had a goal: own a home. Before I turned 30, without a dollar of debt beyond my student loans. My life became a ritual of quiet grind. Wake up, cheap coffee, commute, work, freelance, side shift, home, budget, sleep, repeat. Even when I got my first promotion at work, a modest bump to $42,000, I didn't change a thing. I just increased my savings rate. My roommates upgraded their phones, went out more, bought new clothes. I kept using my cracked screen Samsung and cut my own hair in the bathroom mirror. Some nights I cried from exhaustion, not because I regretted it, but because I was scared that all this effort might never be enough. What if one emergency wiped me out? What if I got sick, or my car died, or rent jumped suddenly? Still, I pushed forward. By year 3, I was bringing in an extra $12,000 annually through freelance work. I stashed every penny into a high-yield savings account I never looked at on purpose. I couldn't be tempted. I just let the numbers grow silently in the background like seeds buried in winter. I missed birthdays, weddings, baby showers. People stopped inviting me. They assumed I didn't care. Truth was, I cared too much, but I couldn't afford even the emotional cost of explaining why I had to say no again and again. That's the thing no one tells you about building a dream by yourself. It's lonely. Incredibly lonely. But I held on. Because one day I knew all those sacrifices would mean something. All the skipped coffees, the ramen dinners, the Friday nights spent working instead of relaxing. They were adding up to a future I could actually own. No cosigner, no family fund, no permission. Just me, my willpower, and the belief that I was worth betting on. And after 10 years, I was finally ready to cash in that bet. It was a sunny morning in late March when I realized I had finally hit my goal. I was sitting at my little folding desk, the same one I'd used since college, sipping stale instant coffee and going over my spreadsheets. Yes, I still tracked every cent manually. When I did the final calculation, I almost didn't believe it. But there it was, staring me in the face. $12,000 in savings. I blinked. Rechecked. Even printed it out and did the math by hand. It was real. 10 years of grit, of sleep-deprived nights and skipped vacations, of saying no when everyone else said yes. And I had finally made it. That night, I allowed myself something I hadn't in years: celebration. I bought a $9 bottle of sparkling wine, made a frozen pizza, and ate it sitting on the floor of my room, watching the sunset behind the blinds. No big party, no applause, just peace. The next morning, I opened Zillow and typed in 3 words: Phoenix starter home. I wanted something modest, nothing fancy or trendy. I knew what I was looking for: solid foundation, decent neighborhood, good bones. A place I could make my own piece by piece with secondhand furniture and DIY projects. After a week of scrolling and comparing, I scheduled my first viewing, then a second, then a third. Over the next month, I saw 26 houses, some beautiful but overpriced, others affordable but falling apart. I kept my expectations realistic, but I also refused to compromise on certain things. No flood zones, no major roof issues, and definitely no HOA. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, I walked into a small 3-bedroom house on the east side of town. Built in the 80s, brick exterior, shady trees in the yard. It wasn't flashy, but the moment I stepped inside, something just clicked. The kitchen was outdated, sure. The paint colors were weird. The backyard was more dirt than grass. But it felt like me, like possibility. I made an offer that evening, $279,000. 2 days later, it was accepted. Just like that, I became a homeowner. Closing was a whirlwind: inspections, paperwork, a million emails. But my credit was flawless. My down payment was hefty, and I had all my documents in order. My mortgage officer even joked, "You're more organized than some real estate agents I've worked with." On closing day, I signed my name 47 times in a room that smelled like stale coffee and printer ink. When the title rep slid the keys across the table and said, "Congratulations, Emily. You own a home," I broke down crying. Not dramatic sobs. Just quiet, uncontrollable tears of relief. I drove straight to the house and stood in the middle of the empty living room, letting it sink in. This was mine. Not my parents'. Not Jake's. Not anyone else's. Mine. I spent the first night there on an air mattress with nothing but a sleeping bag and a flashlight. The house creaked. The plumbing made strange noises. But I didn't care. I was finally free. The next few weeks flew by. I painted the walls soft gray, shopped thrift stores for furniture, hung up framed prints I'd kept in storage for years. My best friend Carla helped me scrub the kitchen tile until it shined. Every little task felt sacred, like I was laying bricks of a new life with my own 2 hands. For the first time in over a decade, I felt like I could exhale, until I made the mistake of reaching out to my family. I didn't do it for approval. I wasn't expecting an apology or even enthusiasm. But somewhere deep down, I hoped that this milestone, this proof that I had built something without them, might bridge the gap. So I sent a short email to my parents. I attached a photo of the house, shared the address, and said they were welcome to visit any time. I also texted Jake, kept it casual. "Hey, just bought my first place. Would love to catch up sometime." 3 days later, I got a call from him. And that's when everything started to fall apart. When I saw Jake's name pop up on my phone, I smiled. It had been almost 2 years since we'd spoken. I was nervous, hopeful, even excited. Maybe he'd say congratulations. Maybe he'd want to see the place. Maybe we'd start to rebuild. I picked up and said, "Hey Jake, what the hell do you think you're doing?" His voice was flat cold, like someone I didn't recognize. "I'm sorry." "You bought a house," he snapped. "With what money, Emily? Who gave you that kind of cash?" It took me a moment to find my voice. "Jake, I've been saving for 10 years, working 3 jobs at one point, living like a monk. You know this. You really expect me to believe that some entry-level marketing salary got you into a mortgage? Come on." I wanted to laugh, or scream, or cry. Instead, I said calmly, "You know what I've done. I never asked for anything from you or them." He was silent for a moment. "Mom and Dad want to see you," he finally said. "Sunday, 5 o'clock. Family dinner. Don't be late." Then he hung up, just like that. I should have said no. I should have ignored it. But something in me needed closure, or maybe validation. Some twisted part of me hoped that sitting down with them, showing them what I had accomplished, might finally earn a sliver of respect. So that Sunday, I drove the hour and 45 minutes back to the house I hadn't set foot in since college. The place looked the same, too neat, too beige, too much like a catalog. The ceramic welcome sign was still nailed to the porch. The hedges were still trimmed into perfect cubes. But I felt like an intruder. Dad opened the door. His hair was grayer, his posture stiffer. He didn't hug me, didn't smile, just stepped aside and muttered, "Emily." Inside, Mom was setting the table with the fancy china. Jake and his wife Lauren sat on the couch, stiff and unreadable. It felt like a funeral. We ate roast beef in near silence. I barely touched my plate. Lauren made awkward small talk about the weather. No one asked about my house. No one said congrats. Then, after dessert, Mom folded her napkin and cleared her throat. "So Emily, tell us about this house." Her tone was syrupy sweet. I knew that tone. It always meant danger. I gave a short answer. The neighborhood was quiet. The mortgage was manageable. I planned to renovate the bathroom myself. "How much was it?" she asked, her fork frozen midair. $279,000, I answered honestly. Dad raised an eyebrow. "And you paid that yourself?" "Yes, every penny. I've been saving for—" "That's not possible," Mom interrupted. "Not on your income." I exhaled slowly. "I've worked multiple jobs, Mom. Freelance. Budgeted obsessively. I can show you the spreadsheets if you want." Jake crossed his arms. "So you've been hiding money this whole time?" I blinked. "Hiding? You stopped contributing to the family fund the second you left for college," he continued. "You've been hoarding your income while the rest of us supported each other." I felt my face go cold. "I haven't lived here in 10 years. I haven't taken a cent from you." "That's not how family works," Dad said quietly. "We all contribute. Everyone benefits. It's the Carson way." "But I never agreed to that," I said, my voice shaking. "I didn't even know what the fund was for." "You never explained." "You chose independence," Mom snapped. "Fine, but you still owe your share. We estimate, based on your likely income over the past decade, that you owe the family approximately $97,000. I froze. "You're not serious," I whispered. Jake looked straight at me. "Lauren and I have delayed having kids so we could do our part. You've been living like a lone wolf, and now you think you can just waltz in with a house and expect us to clap. This isn't about applause," I said, standing up, my chair screeching behind me. This is about me surviving on nothing for 10 years. This is about me clawing my way to stability. You'll make it right, Dad said calmly. You'll sell the house. Pay what you owe. Then we can move forward. I stared at them in disbelief. No, I said. Absolutely not. Then you leave us no choice, Mom said. And that's when I knew. This wasn't a family dinner. This was an ambush. And it was about to get a whole lot worse. 2 weeks after that dinner, I came home from work to find a large envelope taped to my front door. Inside were court documents. My parents were suing me. The claim I had breached an implied financial agreement withheld familial funds and misappropriated resources earned from shared values and upbringing. In plain English, they were demanding $97,000 and asking the court to place a lien on my house until I paid up. I sat down on my couch, barely 2 months old, bought secondhand off Facebook Marketplace, and stared at the papers, hands trembling. It was official. They weren't just disappointed. They were trying to take everything I'd worked a decade to build. At first I panicked. I didn't sleep that night. I scoured legal blogs, Reddit threads, anything that might explain how this was even possible. Could parents sue their adult child for not giving them money? Was family fund some legal loophole I didn't know about? The next morning, after calling 10 law firms, I found someone willing to meet with me for a free consultation, Michael Alvarez, a family law attorney in Tempe. His office was modest and cluttered, his shirt a bit wrinkled, but he had kind eyes and didn't blink when I handed him the documents. This is unusual, he said after skimming through. Is it even legal, I asked. They haven't given me money since I was 18. They're alleging something called a constructive trust, he explained. Basically, they're arguing there was an implied agreement that your financial success was only possible because of the resources and values they instilled in you. I laughed bitterly. So? Because they fed and clothed me as a kid, I owe them my adult income. Legally, that's a stretch, he said. Emotionally, it's manipulative. But still, this could drag out. You'll need to prove financial independence and dismantle their claim point by point. His retainer fee $3,500. I signed the check right then and there. That money was supposed to be for painting the exterior of the house, but now it was a down payment on peace of mind. Over the next few weeks, Michael and I built a case. I dug up every pay stub, tax return, freelance invoice, and bank statement from the last 10 years. I reached out to old roommates who remembered my minimalist lifestyle, former bosses who could confirm how often I'd picked up extra shifts. Even Carla, my best friend, wrote a letter detailing the sacrifices I made while everyone else was enjoying their 20s. Emotionally, though, the lawsuit was eating me alive. I had trouble sleeping. Nightmares where my house disappeared beneath me. I'd wake up thinking I heard a gavel slamming or my mother's voice reading off my spending history like a courtroom indictment. At work, I was distracted. I missed deadlines, stumbled over presentations. My boss pulled me aside to ask if everything was okay. How could I explain, sorry, I'm a little off because my parents are suing me for being financially independent? Eventually, I told Carla everything. We sat on my porch with mugs of tea, the spring air still crisp. They're trying to take your house, she asked, stunned. They're trying to take my freedom, I said. The house is just the symbol, she nodded. Well, then they're going to have to go through all of us. And she meant it. She helped me assemble character witnesses, friends, former co-workers, professors, people who could vouch for my work ethic, my independence, and the years of silent sacrifice I had poured into becoming the woman I was today. Still, part of me kept hoping they'd come to their senses, that I'd get a call saying it was all a mistake, that this was just a scare tactic or some twisted attempt to reestablish contact. But the court date came. No apology, no backpedaling, just silence. And so I suited up for battle, not just for the house, but for everything it represented. My independence, my choices, my story. The day of the preliminary hearing arrived with the same weight as a funeral. I wore my one and only professional outfit, a navy blue blazer and slacks combo I'd bought on clearance years ago for job interviews. I stood outside the courthouse, palms, damp heart pounding like I was walking into a war zone. In many ways, I was. Inside, I spotted them almost immediately, my parents and Jake, sitting together on a bench like the portrait of composed family dignity. My mom wore a modest navy dress with a pearl necklace I hadn't seen since my high school graduation. My dad looked sharp in his funeral suit, the same one he wore to weddings' anniversaries, and now, apparently, legal proceedings against their daughter. They didn't acknowledge me, didn't wave, didn't nod, just silence. Their attorney, a man named Harold Grant, looked every bit the role, silver-haired, perfectly tailored, confident in that subtle, predatory way corporate lawyers exude. He shook hands with my parents, smiled politely at Jake, then glanced at me like I was a speed bump on his way to victory. Michael, my attorney, joined me in the hallway. "Ready?" he asked quietly but firmly. I nodded, as I'll ever be. The hearing wasn't a full trial, just an opportunity for both sides to present initial arguments and for the judge to determine if the case had merit. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, but the tension inside it could have filled a stadium. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Honorable Marcia Langston, looked over her glasses at the documents, then at each of us. "Mr. Grant," she began, "you may proceed." He stood, buttoned his jacket, and began to paint a picture that made my skin crawl. He described parents who had sacrificed everything for their daughter's upbringing, instilled deep values of financial discipline, and created a long-standing tradition of mutual contribution through a family fund. He claimed I had knowingly violated this tradition, secretly amassed wealth using principles taught by my parents, and had now rejected their shared values for selfish independence. He even brought up old birthday cards I'd written as a teenager thanking my parents for teaching me the value of saving. A high school essay titled, "Why Family is My Anchor." I looked at the judge's face, trying to read her reaction, but she was unreadable, stoic, and focused. When it was Michael's turn, he stood and spoke with calm authority. "My client, Ms. Carson, acknowledges her parents raised her with certain financial philosophies, but she never agreed verbally or in writing to any binding contract. Since the age of 18, she has received no financial support from her parents. Everything she has earned, saved, and spent has been entirely her own." He handed over a thick binder filled with documentation, my tax returns, pay stubs, bank records, testimonials from former employers and roommates, and spreadsheets showing my painstaking budgeting for the past 10 years. Then the judge looked at me directly. "Ms. Carson," she asked, "is it true you saved over $300,000 during this period while working multiple jobs?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I can verify every dollar. It took me 10 years of living frugally, working long hours, and saying no to almost every comfort or luxury. But I did it." She nodded slightly, then turned back to Mr. Grant. "Do you have any written agreements to support the claim that your client's daughter was obligated to contribute to a family fund?" Grant hesitated. "No formal agreement, Your Honor, but there's a pattern of behavior, a shared family understanding." The judge raised an eyebrow. An understanding is not a contract, especially when the defendant was legally independent for over a decade. Still, she didn't make a ruling just yet. "This case warrants deeper examination," she said at last. "I'm scheduling a full hearing for 6 weeks from today. In the meantime, there will be no lien placed on Ms. Carson's property, but she is ordered not to sell or refinance it until this matter is resolved." I exhaled slowly. Not a victory, but not a loss either. As we left the courtroom, Michael leaned toward me and said, "They're going to come harder next time. Probably dig into your personal life. Be ready for depositions, for character attacks, for anything they can find." "I am ready," I said. But the truth, I didn't know if I really was. Because this wasn't just a legal battle anymore. This was emotional war, and they knew every weakness I had. The weeks leading up to the full hearing were some of the most emotionally exhausting of my life. My parents' legal team wasted no time launching an all-out assault. They sent document requests so aggressive, it felt like they wanted access to everything I'd ever touched: my personal journals, private emails, even conversations I'd had in group chats with friends. Some of it was pure intimidation, Michael said, but some requests were valid. And that meant I had to dig hard. I spent entire weekends combing through old bank statements, tax documents, W-2s, and freelance contracts. Every time I thought I had everything, they'd send another request, another demand. It wasn't just legal, it was deeply personal. They were trying to unearth any scrap of information that could make me look like a liar. Like I hadn't done this on my own. My savings were draining fast. Between unpaid time off work, attorney fees, and therapy sessions, I'd finally admitted I needed the emergency fund I'd so carefully built was starting to vanish. I kept a brave face at work, but inside, I was unraveling. Michael did his best to protect me. Most of this is theater, he'd reassure. They're banking on wearing you down. He wasn't wrong. But the most painful part wasn't the paperwork or legalese. It was the silence. No phone call from my parents. No message from Jake. Not a single word from the people who had once filled my life with daily checklists, rules, and budget reviews. I thought I would welcome that silence. I didn't. I hated it. It felt like erasure. Still, I pressed forward. I gathered support wherever I could. Carla continued to show up like the sister I never had, bringing groceries when I was too drained to cook, driving me to appointments, even organizing a little get-together just to make me smile. She reminded me I wasn't alone, that I had people who chose me without conditions. We built our witness list carefully. 2 of my college roommates offered to testify about our Spartan living conditions. No heat, some winters shared ramen packets, and the way I used to split one $5 rotisserie chicken over 4 meals. My first boss, Shannon, from the marketing firm where I started, agreed to speak. She remembered how I'd volunteered for every holiday shift, took on side projects to earn a few extra bucks, and never once complained. Even a professor I'd worked under as a student assistant wrote a statement attesting to my discipline and isolation during college, how I turned down every campus event, every party just to save a few dollars. Michael compiled all of it into a tightly organized case file, but we knew what we were up against: emotion. My parents were bringing their version of reality into that courtroom, bolstered by decades of image-crafting, church attendance, PTA awards, photo albums full of Christmas mornings and birthday cakes. They had character witnesses too. Pastor Miller from our old church, Aunt Diane, who had never liked me much, and of course, Jake. It was a war of perception, but I had the truth. 2 days before the hearing, I got a text from Jake. "It's not too late to fix this. Sell the house. Pay what you owe. We can all move forward." I stared at the message for a long time. Not a threat, not even hostile. Just a promise compliance equals belonging. I didn't reply, because I finally understood. Belonging shouldn't be a transaction. The morning of the hearing, I woke up before dawn. I pulled on that same navy blazer, fixed my hair with shaking hands, and looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't see a victim. I saw a woman who had survived, who had built something from nothing, who was about to defend it with everything she had. As I stepped into the courthouse lobby, Carla squeezed my hand. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "you've already won more than they'll ever understand." I nodded, throat tight. It was time, not just to fight for my house, but to prove once and for all that I didn't owe my freedom to anyone. The courtroom felt colder that day. Not just because of the air conditioning, but because I knew this was the final round. Everything that had been quietly brewing for 10 years, resentment, control, guilt, was about to be spilled into public record. My parents sat on the right side of the courtroom, their legal team arranged neatly beside them like soldiers at attention. My dad looked emotionless, hands folded on the table. My mom wore a somber black blazer, her lips pursed, her eyes already watery, whether from sadness or performance I didn't know. Jake sat 2 rows behind them, flanked by his wife Lauren. He didn't look at me. On my side sat Carla, both of my former roommates, Shannon from my old job, and even my former professor who had flown in to testify. It was a small team, but every person there had seen me at my lowest and stayed. Judge Langston entered the room and called us to order. The hearing began. My father took the stand first. He spoke with a calm, measured tone like a disappointed coach addressing a failed team player. He talked about the Carson family values, the long history of mutual contribution, and how he'd raised his children with an understanding that no one succeeds alone. "We always taught our kids to put family first," he said solemnly. Emily knew the rules. She benefited from them. Then she walked away and acted like we were strangers. My mother followed, and her testimony was even more emotional. She painted herself as a mother who sacrificed, who went without, who devoted her entire identity to building a strong family, only to be betrayed by her daughter's selfishness. "We're not greedy," she said, voice shaking. "We just want fairness." Her brother gave up so much, postponed having children, stayed close. Emily got a degree, a job, and left us behind. Is it so wrong to ask her to contribute to the system that raised her? Their attorney then presented oversized photos of birthday parties, old report cards, even a quote from my 10th grade journal they somehow got access to that read, "I wish I could just be free of all their expectations." He showed bank records highlighting Jake's consistent contributions to the family fund. He contrasted it with the total absence of mine, as if that void proved my moral failure. Then it was our turn. Michael started strong. He calmly asked my mother, "Mrs. Carson, you testified that Emily was raised with financial discipline. Would you say that providing food, clothing, and education are basic parental responsibilities?" "Well, yes, of course," she said, visibly uncomfortable. "So you're asking the court to compensate you for fulfilling legal obligations as a parent?" She blinked. "That's not what But that is what your claim implies." Then he turned to my dad. "Mr. Carson, did you provide Emily with any financial support during college? She chose a school we didn't agree with. That was her choice. So you didn't support her at all during that time?" "No," Michael nodded. "And since graduation?" "No, thank you, that's all." He called Tasha, my college roommate, who described how I'd lived in a 9-7 room with 3 other roommates surviving on peanut butter sandwiches and dollar store pasta. Shannon testified next, sharing how I once worked 14 days straight to afford a used laptop after mine crashed. Then it was my turn. I walked to the witness chair and tried to breathe. Michael began. "Emily, can you explain to the court how you managed to save over $300,000 on an average salary?" So I told them about the night I left home with 2 duffel bags, about working 3 jobs, about skipping holidays, birthdays, relationships, about how I never took vacations, how I budgeted everything, how I gave up a social life to chase something that felt impossible, stability. I looked at the judge. I never agreed to the fund. I was told, not asked. When I refused, they cut me off. I've never taken $1 from them since I turned 18. Then came the cross-examination. Their lawyer tried to paint me as someone who rejected her family. He said I used the financial knowledge my parents taught me to build wealth without sharing it. I answered simply, "They taught me how to fear money, not use it." And then came the turning point. My mother was called back to the stand for rebuttal. In her frustration, trying to discredit my claims of total independence, she blurted out, "We gave her money all the time in college, emergency cash, gift cards, everything." Michael stood instantly. "Your Honor, earlier she testified they provided no support during college. Now she's saying the opposite." Judge Langston looked up sharply. "Mrs. Carson, which is it?" My mother froze. I don't remember exactly." "No further questions," Michael said calmly. The damage was done. The contradiction cracked their entire case, and for the first time in the entire hearing, I felt something like hope. The courtroom was silent as my mother stepped down from the witness stand. Her face had gone pale, and the weight of her mistake seemed to settle across her shoulders like an anvil. For a moment, no one moved. Judge Langston adjusted her glasses and looked toward the bench. "We'll now proceed to closing statements." Their attorney, Harold Grant, stood up first. His voice was softer than before, less confident, more desperate. "Your Honor," he began. "While there may have been discrepancies in memory, the core of this case is not contractual, but moral. The Carsons instilled values. They supported their daughter emotionally and intellectually. She built her life on the foundation they provided. He gestured toward me. Yes, she worked hard. Yes, she made sacrifices. But none of it would have been possible without the structure her family created. All they ask is a fair contribution. Not punishment. Just fairness. He sat down with a nod toward my parents, who were both avoiding eye contact with the judge. Then Michael stood. "Your Honor," he said simply, "we've heard about values, about family traditions. But this court does not rule on tradition. It rules on law." He held up one of my spreadsheets. "This document and the dozens of others we've submitted clearly show Ms. Carson's financial independence since the age of 18. She has never signed an agreement, never consented to contribute to any family fund, never received support from her parents in return." He walked a few steps closer to the judge. "What the plaintiffs are asking for is not restitution, it's control. They are seeking to punish their daughter for choosing a life outside their system. This isn't about money. It never was." He paused. "This is about freedom." The room was still. You could hear the creak of the judge's chair as she shifted, gathering the case file. She looked over the paperwork, her expression unreadable, then turned toward all of us. "This court finds no evidence of a legal or binding agreement between the plaintiff and the defendant," she said, voice firm. "Furthermore, it is clear the defendant has been financially independent and self-sufficient for over a decade." I felt my heart pound harder with each word. "The plaintiff's claim is dismissed." She gave one final glance toward my parents. "This court will not enforce expectations disguised as obligations. Case closed." The gavel dropped. It was over. The sound echoed through the room, but inside me everything went quiet. Michael squeezed my arm and smiled. "You did it," he whispered. But I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. I looked toward my parents. My mother had buried her face in her hands. My father sat with his jaw clenched, unmoving. Jake stood behind them, shaking his head, saying something to their attorney. His eyes flicked toward me, then away, like I was someone he used to know but now wished he didn't. A court officer approached me gently. "Miss Carson, your family is being escorted out separately to avoid any confrontation. You may exit in 10 minutes through the main entrance." I nodded. "Thank you." As the courtroom emptied, I sat frozen in my chair. 10 years of grinding, surviving, hiding, and hoping, and now I had protected what I built. I had proven that I wasn't a thief, that I didn't owe anyone my success. But the cost, the silence that followed, wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. A fracture that no ruling could heal. I gathered my documents with Michael's help and stepped into the hallway. He gave me a checklist of what to do next, how to file the judgment, ensure my title was clean, protect myself from any future legal surprises. I listened, nodded, filed it all away in my mental drawer labeled "Stuff Strong People Deal With." Then he said something I'll never forget. "They lost the case, but you gained your voice." I thanked him, walked slowly to the exit, and waited. Not just for my family to leave, but for the moment I could finally breathe again. As I pushed the heavy courthouse doors open into the late afternoon sun, I knew I had won, but I had also changed. This wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. I didn't expect to cry in the parking lot. But as soon as I reached my car, my aging, sun-faded Honda Civic that had taken me to every underpaid job, every grocery store where I clipped coupons, every midnight shift that kept the lights on, I broke. Not loud, dramatic sobs, just tears, quiet and hot, running down my cheeks while I sat behind the wheel, hands gripping it like I needed something to ground me. The court had ruled in my favor. The house was safe. The accusations dismissed. On paper, I had won everything. But emotionally, I had just buried the last fragile thread of connection I had to the family that raised me. I drove home slowly, not even turning the radio on, just listening to the hum of the tires on the road and the occasional creak of the steering column, each sound more comforting than words. I pulled into my driveway just as the sun was setting. My house glowed in the golden light. I stood on the porch, unlocked the door, and stepped into the space I had built from the bones of exhaustion and quiet rebellion. The air inside smelled like lavender and paint. I sat on the porch swing, my housewarming gift from Carla and her friends, and watched the sky dim. That swing had become my sanctuary, my little altar of stillness after months of chaos. I didn't hear the footsteps until they were almost behind me. "Emily," I turned. "Jake." He looked tired. His tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled up. He didn't look angry, just confused. "And maybe a little lost. I figured I'd find you here," he said. I didn't answer. He sat on the edge of the steps, a safe few feet away, elbows on his knees. The silence between us stretched dense and unsaid. Finally, he broke it. "They're devastated." I turned toward him slowly. "They sued me." "I know." He rubbed his face with both hands. "You embarrassed them, Emily. They say everyone at church is whispering. Dad didn't even go last Sunday." "They tried to take my home," I replied. "Something I built with no help from them. And when I didn't give it to them, they tried to make the law take it instead." Jake's jaw tightened. "It wasn't about money." I stared at him. "Then what was it about?" "Family, legacy, loyalty." His voice was low. "They built this whole system, and you just walked away like it meant nothing." I felt anger rise in me, not hot and explosive, but cold, clear, controlled. "I didn't walk away from family," I said. "I walked away from control disguised as love." Jake didn't respond. He just looked out toward the street like maybe the answer to all of it was out there, hidden in the shadows between the streetlights. Then he asked, "So what now? You just move on?" I nodded. "Yes. I heal. I live. I keep this house. I host dinners. I grow tomatoes in that empty corner of the yard. I finally rest." Jake nodded slowly, then stood. "You've always been stubborn. You've always been compliant." That made him smirk just a little. It felt like the first time he looked like my brother in years. He hesitated. Then he said, "If I call you next week, will you answer?" "Depends what you're calling for." He nodded again. "Fair enough." And then he left. No hugs, no grand closure. Just a step in a different direction. Inside, I turned on the lights, lit a candle, and sat on the floor of my living room. There was no applause, no parade, just peace, and that was more than enough. Healing didn't happen overnight. In fact, the weeks that followed felt even harder than the lawsuit itself. With the battle behind me, there was suddenly space for all the emotions I'd buried for years: hurt, rage, confusion, loneliness. Without the adrenaline of fighting, I had no distractions, just silence and my thoughts. The house felt different, still mine, still sacred. But now echoing with a kind of grief. I hadn't anticipated the grief of letting go of who I hoped my family could be. Carla noticed it first. During one of our weekly dinners, something we'd started doing after the court case ended, she stayed behind to help clean up. As we washed dishes, she looked at me and said softly, "You won the case, Emily. But I don't think you've stopped fighting yet." I knew she was right. So I did something I never thought I would do. I looked for a therapist. It wasn't easy. For years, I saw therapy as a luxury I couldn't afford. Something other people did when they had time, money, and emotional space. But now I realized it wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity. I found Dr. Nadia Singh, a licensed therapist who offered sliding scale fees for low-income or transitional clients. From our very first session, she saw through my walls. Family estrangement, she said during our introduction, isn't just about distance. It's about mourning the relationship you wanted but never had. Those words hit like lightning. Over the following months, I unpacked more than just the lawsuit. I revisited memories from childhood I hadn't allowed myself to feel at the time, the way my mom would scrutinize every grocery receipt, how my dad only gave affection when I followed their rules, how even my accomplishments were always filtered through the lens of how does this help the family. I realized I hadn't just been saving money all those years, I'd been building a fortress, brick by brick, not just to protect my bank account but to protect my sense of self. Dr. Singh helped me see that my guilt, yes, I still felt it wasn't mine to carry. "That guilt was programmed into you," she said one day. It's the lever they use to control you. Every time you feel bad for standing up for yourself, ask who benefits from that guilt. Answering that question changed everything. Slowly, I began to allow joy into my life. Real joy. Not the guarded, budgeted kind I used to ration like sugar, but spontaneous, unearned happiness. I joined a community garden 3 blocks away and started growing cherry tomatoes, cucumbers, and sunflowers. I hosted weekend brunches with mismatched mugs and thrift store plates. I let myself buy a ridiculous flamingo-themed shower curtain just because it made me laugh. And most importantly, I let people in. Carla's circle became my circle. We formed a dinner club rotating between homes, each meal filled with stories, laughter, and the kind of warmth that doesn't demand anything in return. For the first time, I felt what chosen family really meant. No financial contracts, no emotional toll, just love freely given and freely received. And then one day I got a message from Jake. It was a simple text, "Can we talk?" No guilt, no pressure, just an opening. We met at a small diner halfway between our neighborhoods. The conversation wasn't magical or emotional. It was awkward, filled with long pauses and careful phrasing. But it was real. "I'm not saying they were right," Jake said after his second cup of coffee. "But you leaving?" It shook everything up. It changed the whole family. "I didn't leave to hurt anyone," I said. "I left to survive." He nodded. "I believe that now." We didn't solve anything that day, but we made a promise to keep talking, to start again. Not as representatives of our parents' ideology, but as 2 adults figuring out how to reconnect without manipulation. That was enough, and it was more than I ever thought I'd get. A year passed. The lawsuit felt like a distant nightmare, though its shadow still lingered in quiet moments. I didn't wake up in cold sweats anymore, but every now and then I'd have a dream that the house disappeared, or that my mother was standing at the foot of my bed holding a spreadsheet. But mostly life was calm. My job had changed. I received a promotion to project manager at the agency. My team respected me, and my boss started assigning me the kinds of campaigns that made me feel excited instead of drained. With the raise, I finally built a modest emergency fund, backup one that didn't feel like I had to hoard it in fear. The house, it was thriving. I'd painted every room with colors I chose for myself, not what was on sale or what my parents would have approved of, but soft greens, warm taupes, even a deep navy accent wall in the bedroom. I refinished the kitchen cabinets with help from Carla's friend, who was a contractor, and turned the spare room into a mini creative studio for my writing and side projects. More than that, the space felt lived in. Not showroom perfect, but authentic. Fridge magnets, mismatched pillows, thrifted furniture that had character. Every item had a story. Every corner held a choice I'd made for myself. I'd built a home, not just a house. And with it, I'd built a life. But the true surprise came one afternoon when I received a package in the mail addressed in Jake's handwriting. Inside was a simple frame, no note, just a photo. It was a snapshot from our childhood, the 2 of us, maybe 8 and 6 years old, sitting on the front steps of our old house holding melting popsicles and laughing like there was no tomorrow. I stared at it for a long time. Maybe he was trying to remind me that not all of it was bad. That before the rules and expectations and silent wars, there was once joy. I texted him a thank you. He replied with just, "She had her baby. Her name's Lily." I froze. Jake and Lauren had a daughter. After all the delays, all the pressure, all the arguments, they finally took that step. And he told me. I didn't know what to say at first, so I typed and deleted 4 different messages before finally sending, "I'd love to meet her when you're ready." 2 weeks later, I did. It was a cautious visit hosted at their modest apartment. Lauren greeted me kindly but nervously, and Jake hovered like a watchdog. But when I held Lily, none of that mattered. She was tiny, warm, new, innocent of everything that had come before. "She has your nose," Jake said, half smiling. "Poor thing," I teased. It was a small moment, but it mattered. We didn't talk about the past that day. We didn't rehash the trial or our parents or the unspoken history still burning in our bones. We just existed in the present, awkward, careful, but present. It was the beginning of something, not a fix, but a seed. I sent my parents a card, not a letter, not a phone call. Just a simple greeting with a photo of Lily and a note that read, "Congratulations on your first grandchild." They didn't respond, but they didn't send it back either. And that silence this time didn't hurt as much, because I wasn't waiting for their approval anymore. I had built a life beyond their reach, and now finally I was learning how to live in it, on my terms, fully, freely. 2 years to the day after I closed on my home, I hosted a backyard dinner party, what I called my home-iversary. It was simple string lights draped from the fence, fold-out tables covered in mismatched linens, and a grill that sputtered more than it seared. Carla made her famous pasta salad. Shannon brought brownies. My neighbor Gabe lent me a Bluetooth speaker. It was nothing extravagant, but it was mine. We laughed until our stomachs hurt, passed around paper plates loaded with food and toasted with dollar store wine glasses that clinked offbeat. Someone made a joke about how the backyard used to look like a haunted construction zone when I first moved in, and we all burst out laughing. In that moment, I looked around at the people seated around me, friends, neighbors, co-workers who had become something more than colleagues. These weren't just guests. They were my chosen family. They were here because they wanted to be. No conditions, no contracts, just love. Later that night, after everyone had left and the fairy lights buzzed quietly over my head, I sat alone on my porch swing. A cool breeze cut through the warm air. My phone buzzed with a message from Jake, just a photo of Lily now nearly toddling with a frosting-smeared face and a tiny party hat on crooked. I smiled, sent a heart emoji. That was our rhythm now, tentative connection built slowly with boundaries and mutual respect. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that's all I ever wanted. I thought back on everything that had brought me to this point, the sacrifice, the silence, the courtroom, the therapy, the small victories no one clapped for. I thought about the time I sat on this very porch, swing terrified of losing it all. And now here I was, still standing still, thriving, still mine. That night, I took out my journal for the first time in months and wrote something simple. Independence isn't cold. It's not cruel. It's the kind of freedom that makes space for the right people to walk in, not because they have to, but because they choose to. The lesson I've carried through it all. That sometimes the most radical thing you can do is protect your peace. Not everyone will understand your boundaries. Not everyone will celebrate your wins. And not everyone will believe you deserve what you built with your own hands. But you know what? That's okay. Because you don't need everyone. You just need the right ones. And as I finally went to bed that night, windows open, soft breeze carrying in the laughter that still lingered in the yard, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Whole. It's been 3 years since the lawsuit, and my life looks very different now. Not glamorous, not viral-worthy, but solid. Peaceful. Quiet in the way that matters most, not the silence of isolation but of contentment. I still live in the same house, same squeaky floors, same thrifted furniture, same porch swing that's weathered every season with me. But now when I walk through the front door, I feel a kind of warmth that has nothing to do with insulation. It's safety. It's self-trust. It's home. I don't think I'll ever be fully over what happened. Some wounds don't vanish, they just become part of your blueprint. But what I've learned is that healing isn't about erasing pain. It's about reclaiming the space it once lived in. My relationship with Jake continues fragile but hopeful. He sends photos of Lily, sometimes voice notes. We're building something slow and careful, and that's enough for now. As for my parents, we remain distant. There's no fairy tale reunion. But there's peace in that too. Letting go isn't giving up, it's choosing yourself when others won't. If you've made it this far, maybe you're carrying a story like mine. Maybe you've been told that choosing your own path makes you selfish. that boundaries are betrayal, that your worth is measured by your compliance. I'm here to tell you that's a lie. You are allowed to protect your peace, to build something just for you, to walk away from people who use love like a leash. And when you do, you may just find, like I did, that the life you build on your own terms is the most sacred thing you'll ever own. Because home isn't just a place, it's a decision. And I chose mine.